Kim Sundberg, and I have lived in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska my whole life. I was born in Anchorage. My parents moved back to Seattle when I was 5 years old. I started fishing at a very young age. Some of my earliest memories in Alaska were camping on the Kenai River with my parents and my brothers and sisters, and fishing for cohos and Chinook salmon in the Kenai. So I grew up in the North Seattle area, went to school in Seattle, went to the University of Washington, got an undergraduate degree in oceanography, biological oceanography, and went up to Alaska right after I had my degree. Applied for work up there in various different agencies, got a part-time position, or actually it was a grant-supported position with Alaska Department of Fish and Game. We got a boat, and my wife and I would go out every summer, usually in July and August, and catch and free salmon to eat all winter long. So I guess I've been eating salmon my whole life and enjoying it. It's great food. In the 80s, we wanted to look for some property to retire to, and so we found some property on San Juan Island, some shoreline property in False Bay. We fully sort of retired out of Alaska in 2000 and sailed our boat down here from Seward, and have been here ever since full time. But it's much more difficult to catch salmon here. I'd go out to Pile Point and, catch silvers in September out there in pinks, but it was just a lot harder, and it was a big hassle. You'd have to pull up your lines and stop fishing when the southern residents would come around, because in the early 2000s they were regular inhabitants out there. Lately, with the closures and everything, I very rarely fish. Sometimes I'll fish blackmouth. It just seems like it's getting more and more difficult to set up a fishing trip, know that you can actually go out. And so most of my fishing is now done up in British Columbia or Alaska. My career in Alaska was essentially, my primary responsibility was protecting salmon streams. Similar to Washington State, but actually more powerful in the state of Washington. Protecting wild fish populations is the holy grail of the ecology of the Pacific Northwest. Everything depends on salmon. A lot of the birds on the streams, they feed either directly on salmon or on the eggs or on the insects in the carcasses, or the productivity of the riparian areas is driven by salmon. Stable isotope studies have shown that the nitrogen and the carbon in salmon essentially migrates into the trees, and you can actually trace salmon molecules into the largest trees that exist in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. So it's pretty fundamental to the ecology. It's a keystone species, and it's heartbreaking to see the loss of wild salmon, because you know that the ecosystem is changing, and despite all of our best efforts to try to restore and protect salmon, it just seems like we're starting to lose them here in the Pacific Northwest. Well, I think people moving in here, I guess I would be telling them stories about, my experiences here with salmon, and then also those in Alaska, and encouraging them to support efforts to do restoration work here and to protect. We have still relatively, I say relatively pristine. They're not pristine, but they're relatively undisturbed pocket beaches and gravel beaches here, and kelp beds and productive nearshore waters that support juvenile salmon coming out from all the natal streams on the mainland and in Canada. And a lot of our efforts here have been to protect those habitats from things that are detrimental to them, things like bulkheads, docks, modifications, you know, that's the kind of things that you see when you go down south to the Seattle area, where people have just walled in the beaches for their private houses and taken away all that important nearshore area for rearing juvenile fish. I think that we're doing the best we can to provide good habitat for the juvenile fish, but we're not getting enough wild fish from the mainland streams to fully utilize our habitats. I'm hopeful that efforts on the mainland are going to pay off with more fish coming our way, and I think that that's the key to getting our salmon populations back at a level that we can be sustained.